Okay.
Hey, we're live. Hello, this is Mark Littlewood. I'm from the Business of Software conference, which is why we've got one of our old logos behind us. And I'm joined today by Ash Maurya, who has just written a rather comprehensive book on scaling lean, which is about using the lean startup principles in growing and growth businesses. So just before I introduce Ash, please don't forget that not only will Ash be coming and speaking at Business of Software Conference USA in Boston, 12th and 14th of September. If you haven't signed up and aren't coming yet, more fool you. You're going to run out of time. The hotel rooms will run out by the end of next week, I think, and we have a price break on tickets that runs out on Friday. So go and fill your boots. And let me introduce Ash.
Thanks for having me, Mark. It's a pleasure to be on.
You're very welcome. I'm going to switch the view so that we get to see your pretty face rather than mine. Actually, you're much better looking than I am, so that's as it should be. But Ash, give us a little bit of background about yourself.
Sure. So I tell people I'm first and foremost a practicing entrepreneur. Beyond that, I've written a couple of books now. I'm the founder of LeanStack, where we build tools, content, and coaching resources really to solve what I call the innovation problem, trying to raise odds of success, trying to make this all make sense out of it all.
Great. And your book, Scaling Lean, came out earlier this year?
That's correct. Yeah, it was launched in June of this year. Although it's been, it feels like forever because I've been speaking and talking about it for over a year and a half now.
It's one of those funny things, actually, writing a book. You write a book and you kind of get totally into it and know what it's all about, and then you send it off to the publisher. And then 18 months later or so, someone will come back and it comes out, and you almost kind of have forgotten what you were doing when it happened.
Absolutely. I mean, I tend to take a different approach. I teach everything in the book before I write. I actually sit down to write it. So part of that year and a half was, maybe a year of that was really say 9 months of it was really teaching and doing workshops. And then I sit down to write. But you're right. I did go through a traditional publisher, and it was 9 months from when I thought the book was complete to when it actually showed up on, in the door and the bookstores.
Got you. And it was a different publisher this time, wasn't it?
Yeah, so my first book was with O'Reilly. The second one is with a portfolio group at Penguin Random House.
Cool. We love both of them, actually, and O'Reilly come along to Business Software and give people free books and stuff. Yeah. So we love them as much as we love Penguin, who we work with quite a lot over in the UK. Now, just before we start, I mean, you're an expert on MVP and lean startup and some of these things. Every year we do a different device for our conference, and so we have our Business of Software logo, but we always try and come up with something that's a little bit quirky and probably kind of relates to something that's going on in current times. Last year, the Business of Software US logo was a unicorn inside a bubble, with the unicorn's horn pricking the bubble. This year, we've been various things we've been running around and looking at, but we came up with this, and I wondered what you thought.
Boss 10.
So Boss 10, it's the 10th Business of Software USA, and there's a really, we thought that as Trump is getting so much attention, that we might just kind of hijack the slogan and so make software great again.
Yeah, I like it, and I also like the. I mean, it's got the 10 stars. So I'm a big soccer football fan. So I think it's a great, like, even a badge if you have that on a shirt to give out.
We literally stole it from his campaign. I'm just a bit worried it might be a bit too political, but we've got some others. But it's good to test that one out. Right, some questions. Going to start with Mark Stevens, who, funnily enough, just registered about half an hour ago. So he says, have you ever had any clients who were too lean?
That were too lean? Actually, I have not. So one of the things that I've found over the years is that lean, in retrospect, seems like common sense. There's nothing new under the sun. It all seems like everyone should be doing this. But even our team, we struggle with it. And a lot of it is because the mind knows what to do, but the body does not follow. So a lot of these things are counterintuitive. We have gotten more people outside the building, but also when they get out, get them to do the right things. I always describe the innovator's bias or the entrepreneur's bias. We all fall in love with our solutions, and we are no different, not immune to it. So I find that more often than not, people will take shortcuts, and I haven't really come across anyone that I can say is really too lean.
Okay, that's a good answer. There's one that was submitted. I can't remember who the guy was, but he sent this through, and I slightly hesitate to post this because it's quite a big question. Hello, Ash. Please explain what tools we should use in all steps in the customer fabric in case of online or offline products. Thanks, Ben. So let's just kind of step back from that a little bit, and ask you about what tools you think people should be using, and I don't think we can do that necessarily for every stage and every phase, but what are the critical things you should be doing?
I'll give it a stab. So I saw his question when I was fumbling around in the interface, and I was like, wow, that's really open-ended. It's as open-ended as it gets, because it's really a whole swath of possible answers. So maybe I'll describe tooling from a sense of process. So a lot of what I talk about with the application of lean is at a meta level. So there, some of the core tools that I advocate are some basic business modeling tools. And if we look at business modeling as a concept, business planning used to be the way to do things. The problem with business plans is they take too long to write. At the end, no one reads them. The plan's going to change 100 times before you find something that works. So a lot of us in the business modeling camp are bigger advocates of creating lighter weight tools. So the lean canvas is one example of that. So take your idea, using a product metaphor, break it into its component pieces, and identify what's riskiest, not necessarily what's easiest, and then start tackling them through experiments. And so we have built other tools to capture what an experiment is, some best practices for designing experiments. So that's kind of at a meta level. Now, beyond that, there are a swath of things. In the lean world, we are very big on data. So how you collect data, there are all kinds of analytics tools. I actually find that too many people now can measure everything. So they, rather than getting clarity, they drown in numbers. Google Analytics, classic example, a few lines of JavaScript code, and you're now flooded with hundreds, if not thousands, of data points to look at. And you can stare at them every day, and they don't talk back to you. So I find that. But
they do directly they contradict each other in our experience. Kind of more analytics.
Yeah, I mean that can get me. Actually work out how. Yeah, that can get me on the vanity metric side, because depending on the day and the mood, you could look at half the screen and get really excited that we're getting people are coming to the site at least, and then you look at the other half, no one's buying, and you can get really depressed. So there's that challenge with the metrics. And so in the earlier stages, I'm a bigger advocate of using a handful of metrics, and that's why even the subtitle of the book is the key metrics that you should be using for startup growth, or I would say launching a new early stage innovative project. So there, I'm not that big on all the toolings. I think there are some great products out there, but you can really hone in on just a handful of metrics and start with those, even if you manually did things. Because in the beginning, a lot of the learning is qualitative versus quantitative. You're going and talking to people. You're kind of building, to use this scientific term, hypotheses around your market. And that all happens through qualitative learning. So there, I'm not as big on tools. Now, certainly as the product begins to scale offline or online, you have to build more systems, more processes. And so that's when there's a swath of analytics tools, there's a swath of email marketing tools, there's a content marketing. So depending on what strategies you're employing, we can pick any one of those and start talking about tools, but there are tons of tools that will come into play.
Okay. I think there's another question around that, I guess, or there's a question around, for me, what's the difference between lean in a scaling business or lean in the enterprise and lean in a startup? Because the whole lean thing became very, very well known and a viral idea as a startup thing. And so many, I mean, the problem with viral ideas is they're very, very easy to, I mean, this is the definition of a virus, is that it spreads easily, but it also mutates.
Yes.
And does it mutate, which is why you can never cure the common cold, because there are so many different versions of it. It's sort of so applicable to lean because it means so many things to different people. So can you just give me a definition of lean in the enterprise or lean at scale that kind of will help people work out exactly what kind of cold is making their nose dribble?
Sure. Yeah. So I would say that, all the kind of lean thinkers or lean startup thinkers, I would say, to be more accurate, really we're charged with this mantra of get outside the building, get customer validation inside, and build the MVP and launch. So that was Lean Startup 1.0, as I like to call it. And it was really about charging the innovator or the entrepreneur to really get off their metaphorical garage and go in and study the world before you build the product. Because if you stay inside, you just fall in love with the product, and we waste too much time building things nobody wants. And so that was the original message, and it worked. What I found is that when some of those entrepreneurs came back in, or innovators came back in, this happened more in the larger companies, they would go to their stakeholders and say, look at what we have learned. And people would look at that and say, that's interesting, but I still will not invest in your idea because I don't see the business case or the story behind this. So what I find, and this also happens in the investment world. So if you take away some of the early adopter tech angels and even VC investors, a lot of them still need to see more traction or more evidence that there is an investable idea here. There's a problem worth solving. So that's what I look at. The challenge of Lean Startup 2.0 is that we need to shift the conversation. The first conversation was the methodology with the entrepreneur or the innovator. The second one is with the stakeholder. How can the stakeholder get behind Lean Startup and begin to see the big picture? Also, when we talk about a scaling product, as we scale the product, both the teams get larger in size. And then we also get, it's also more challenging as the product grows, because now you have customers. We think we get more clarity, but things become fuzzier because we have so many different types of customers. Segmentation becomes a challenge. And so that's the flavor of the problems as they evolve, as you go to larger companies. When I work with large enterprises, sometimes it's even, we get stuck on the first box, which is who is the customer, because they have so many different types of customers that they need to focus in on, maybe a subset or a persona of a subset to focus in on. So those are some of the challenges that I see as you go to kind of larger enterprises. Beyond kind of the stakeholder conversation, there's also cultural challenges. So in a startup, we have a lot more flexibility and freedom to go and do what we want. In a larger organization, we've got more of the cultural biases, I would call it. Sometimes we call them the antibodies, which is more about preserving the status quo than trying to disrupt anything or rock the boat too much. So those are, I think, workable challenges, but there are kind of those challenges to address as well.
Okay, great. So I'm going to bring in Torsten Hardies here with a very good question. What are the critical steps in experimental design for someone that thinks like an engineer? I'm sure you've got a list.
Yeah, actually, in the book, there's a chapter called The 7 Habits of Running Highly Effective Experiments. I blatantly stole that from Stephen Covey, at least the headline. But yeah, so if we talk about experiments, I would say the first thing I would say there is that we all run experiments. We might have a campaign we want to test. We might have a product we're launching. And so we have some expectation of what happens. We experiment with it. We put it out there, and then we measure what happens. And then we decide whether it was a good experiment or a bad experiment. The problem is that we don't run the experiments very scientifically. We don't run them well. So the 7 habits kind of walk through some of the steps. I maybe not walk through all 7, but I'll touch on some of the more critical ones. One of the most important one is to declare outcomes up front. So much like a scientist doesn't post-rationalize, because we entrepreneurs are especially gifted at that. We can launch a product in the summer months. If it doesn't sell, it's because everyone's on holidays, and that's just the reason why. In the fall, everyone's coming back from holidays, and then here in the US, we have got Thanksgiving and Halloween, and so there's always a reason. One reason or the other is Christmas coming, so there's always a reason we can say, oh, things aren't working because of these things. So that's the first thing. You have to declare outcomes up front. The other things is that the way we craft the outcome needs to be falsifiable. That's, again, a big term from the scientific method, but it just means that it needs to be not vague, but testable. So me saying I'm going to go and promote my product and get customers is not really testable, because if I get one customer, that statement could be true. That's the inductivist trap. If I go and get 10 customers, it's also true. If I go and get 100 customers, it's also true. So you need to put some constraints around that, which is the fragment I like is saying something to the extent of, I'm going to do this specific action and it's going to drive this measurable outcome. So if you describe it in that way, it becomes a binary condition that's either going to be true or not. Some of the other best practices there are time boxing. So again, the trap we run into is we will run an experiment and we will make it be a big experiment. So we just wait forever for it to be done. And if we don't get the results, we just keep waiting till we give up. And what I've learned is that time is the scarcest resource we have. Whether you're in a large company or you're in a startup, it's the only resource we never get back. You can get more money and people added to your project, but you can't get more time at it. Usually, you have to. It's not like you can go back and go back in time machine. So for me, I look at time boxing as kind of that third thing. And then some of the other things in there are A/B tests. So that just again comes from the way science and even like medicine is done. And we don't just test things in isolation. You need to benchmark and test against them. And then there are a few others there, but those are probably the big hitters.
Okay, and while you were speaking there, I was just looking up the chapter in the book, and there are 7 very good points. On the subject of the 7 habits of highly effective people, I bought it once because I thought it would improve my life no end. And I never ended up reading it because I left it on the top of my car at a gas station with a cup of coffee and drove off. So I don't even know if that's in the... I don't know if that's one of the key attributes of highly successful people or not, but I suspect not.
Yeah, probably not.
So following on from that one, I think this is a great question from Fiona McPhee. What are the most common mistakes you see in implementing Lean?
So I would say the biggest mistake, I touched on it in passing, is really, I have this on my shirt, love the problem, not your solution, because I feel that is how I can distill my message down into a soundbite. And the most common mistake I see is people forgetting that. So like in science, we have first principles. You always have to go back. So for me, this is a statement that holds true everywhere. So when you're starting out, rather than building out your solution, go and first test for the problem. Back away from the solution to figure out the problem. Even as the product is launched, as you start to hear customers ask for feature requests, you have to also go back and figure out what job were they really trying to do when they asked for that feature request, and what's the underlying problem they're trying to solve. Too many times the customer request is not the solution to their problem. So that's kind of happens there. The last one, and this is a big one, and this ties also into the lean startup concept of the pivot. So usually we are wired to run away or to avoid failure. And so oftentimes when I see teams that run an experiment and they get invalidation, they start using the word pivot. And I heard one team saying, "Oh, we are very lean because we pivot all the time." And to me, that just worried. And so again, pivot's a very healthy thing, but a pivot not grounded in learning, and that again goes back to the problem. If you have a failure, if you don't know why that thing just occurred, if you change direction, that's just a random disguise, see what sticks strategy. Sometimes you might get lucky, but more often than not, it's a suboptimal way of finding breakthrough. And breakthrough, by definition, if you really kind of logically think about it, requires us to have a new insight. You can't have a new insight unless your old insight is kind of invalidated. So I look at failure as almost a prerequisite for breakthrough. And you can almost argue that that's why the hockey stick curve is flat in the beginning. It's not because we're lazy. It's because we're going through lots of invalidation and digging, kind of, instead of running away, we're digging deeper and asking that key question, why? So what's the problem? So to me, that's the fundamental thing. And even if we look at science and we look at breakthrough discoveries like the microwave oven, or the microwave in general, X-rays, penicillin, they all were accidental discoveries. But again, the scientists didn't just say, oh, this was a failure, I'm throwing this out. They studied it further, and that's what led to the big breakthrough. So I feel that to be almost as a gift that we throw away because we don't ask those critical questions.
Yeah, I suppose one of the things I remember Eric Ries saying on a few occasions when we've been speaking, or he's been speaking at events, is that the key unit of the lean startup is learning.
Right.
And that's part of that whole scientific approach, that people have to understand that learning isn't failure.
Yes.
Now, I think Fiona, possibly, and you can come back on this if you'd like, were you talking about that kind of failure or mistake and not learning, or were you thinking about the things that people do that bastardize the concept? So
Sure.
I'll leave that with Fiona to react. I'm going to choose this question now. It's not really a question, it's a statement, which would mean that the microphone would explode at one of our events, because we don't do that. But that's a link to the Scaling Lean book, and it's, as you say, it's available in the UK and the US now. So there we go. Right, more questions. This one I like. Ben Boone. Love the t-shirt. How do I get one? Well, Ben, I'm very pleased you asked that. I'm assuming you're meaning the very excellent Business and Software Conference t-shirt I'm wearing. Well, the only way you can get this is to come to Business and Software Conference on the appropriate year and get it. If you come this year, I'll maybe give you one of these, but I have a sneaking suspicion you were talking about ashes.
Well, I think we should both talk about it, since it's kind of vague how you get the t-shirt. So this is actually a new t-shirt we just put out. If you tweet me or send me a message at just ash@leanstack.com, we'll hook you up with one.
Wow, I think my mechanism for getting t-shirts is better.
You're playing hard to get because you've been out for 10 years. We're still starting out, so we have to give it away.
Okay, right. I like this one. We're not lean. Why should we be?
Yeah. So I don't like to get into the preaching of why one should be lean. Although I will just talk about the problems. And so. Most of the people that fall into kind of the lean thinking approach usually have previous experiences where they have tried the alternatives. And the way I describe it, I'll maybe describe it with a story. So typically when we get hit with an idea, I find that we do one of two things. We either lock ourselves up in that metaphorical garage and build product, or we chase resources. We go and find investors or stakeholders who can give us the resources, and we pitch the idea again. From experience, I built many products. All my products started out as awesome ideas. So I would have told everyone this is going to be the next big thing when it was starting out. Not all of them went on to do that. So that was the first kind of thing that made me question what I was, my approach. But the more important thing is that I knew that good ideas were rare and hard to find. So you're going to have to go through a lot of stuff that doesn't work before you find the things that do. So there is a search process for the ideas that are going to work. So that was the other kind of big insight, is that you have to search. It's not just execution, but search. But the last part is what really got me onto the lean kind of bandwagon, if you want to call it that. And that is that my cycle time when I was starting with my ideas was just too long. So I would take all this time to build out the product and then realize it's not what customers needed. I would go away for a while, try to fix it. And I would take 18 to 24 months on average with an idea from the point I had the first spark of the idea to when I knew it was going to work or not work. And that cycle time was frankly too long. So my mantra became, life's too short to build something nobody wants, because we don't get any younger. And again, that's the time being the scarcest resource. So for me, what I look at Lean helping you do, there is no guarantee of success. And that's a disclaimer I put in all my books, is that a good methodology cannot guarantee success, but it can guarantee feedback. It can give you a progress feedback on whether you are headed in the right direction or not. And what I find is what that Lean does is that it really stacks all the risks first. If you're playing the game of Jenga, we have to take these weak pieces out. That is the entrepreneurial mindset, is you take your idea and you poke not at the easy things, but at the hardest things early. So you de-risk the idea up front, and then it doesn't become smooth sailing, but it becomes, at least in the realm of possibility, it becomes more achievable. And that to me is fundamentally the message of Lean. It's really about kind of not buying into entrepreneurs being, risky guys who want to jump off cliffs, but rather being risk-averse people. And Richard Branson's a great example of that. When he started Virgin Airlines, he actually negotiated the right to give back the airplanes to Boeing if the airline failed within a year. And that's an example of a billionaire who's protecting his downside. So that's the mindset that I look at Lean providing. Is it's really about taking something that's highly uncertain, but tackling what's riskiest first in a time-boxed manner. And that gives you room to then iterate to kind of move from there. And that to me is the appeal of why Lean.
Okay, that's fantastic. Gosh, we're starting to run quite short on time as well. So I'm just going to come back with this from Fiona. So I think she was talking about the things that people get wrong about Lean. What don't they understand it? So they think they're going in and being Lean. And
got it. Okay. So I would say the classic misunderstanding of Lean is this comparison to being cheap or bootstrapping. And a lot of people will come out and say we're being Lean because we're not spending any money. And this is something that a lot of people have kind of talked about. So Lean is not so much about being cheap with resources, but again, rather maximizing your learning per unit time. And sometimes that's going to require spending more resources, spending more money up front. So that's one of the classic things I see, is that's an unfortunate just misrepresentation of the term Lean. I guess some of the other ones, if you go into kind of the hype side of the Lean, because as you said, Lean Startup has spread very quickly. So a lot of people will cherry pick things that they are either already doing or they like to do, and they'll pass themselves off as Lean. So apart from the not spending money, things like A/B testing, people will say, oh, we do A/B testing, so we are Lean. So I look at a lot of the cherry picking of some of the tactics. But where I when someone, going back to the original question of too Lean, I find that a lot of these are really baked in some core meta principles. If you look at even like the Agile Manifesto, there are some basic core tenets, and they all have to be taken together. And there's a reason why we do certain things. So it's not enough to just go outside the building or just run an experiment. There's really a follow-up on what do you do with that learning and how do you then turn it to business model results. So going back to the statement that you made, Mark, about learning being the measure of progress, in the second book, I poke on that a little bit, because I found that we sometimes get people coming back with stacks of interview notes and saying, look at all the learning I'm doing. So I'm and they look at me and they say, look, I'm following the scripts, I'm going out and doing them. And that's commendable, because that is behavior change. But my next question to them is, well, how many customers have you signed up? And when that number is disappointing 0, that's when I actually wonder, have we gone maybe too far and given people, gone them outside the building where they're now wasting time collecting all this learning, but then not turning it to results. So I think there's a balancing. So to me, it's not so much go and get all the learning, but it's get the learning and turn them into business model results in that time-boxed manner. So there is that constraint that's also imposed on the teams.
Fantastic. I think that's a great answer. So I guess we're sort of out of time, but I hope we can get another one in here quickly. What will be the next big thing after Lean?
So what I think Eric Ries and everyone else that's been part of this has been brilliant at doing is really make Lean kind of all-encompassing, right? So I feel that sometimes methodologies come out and the creators, and Eric has his name on the Lean Startup, as he has a trademark on it. He could have been kind of very very dictatorial and saying, you know, this is lean and this isn't, but he has actually taken kind of the benevolent kind of approach where really he's brought everything in. So it's really a meta process, not so much a process. So I find that it's not, I think we're going to continue to see it evolve. It's going to grow up into kind of the corporate adoption of it. It's going to mean, you know, different things in time. So I don't know that it has kind of burned out yet. I think some of the core ideas are just going to get evolved and get more nuanced as we go on. And again, like I said, the nice thing about, I would say the powerful thing about the idea is that it's really a cross-functional discipline. So it's not just for developers, not just for marketers or salespeople or CEOs or stakeholders, investors. It kind of brings everyone in. And so as long as they are willing to continue on this conversation, I feel like it's going to grow and evolve from here. But the challenges are going to change. So some of the things that I see is really that stakeholder conversation. You know, how do we take this to larger companies? How do they apply this in the silos that we have created, which is the modern work environment? I call it the curse of specialization. You know, we've got all these people that do certain jobs and hand off from one to the other, and a lot is lost in that process. And Lean is all about more of a smaller, cross-functional, multidisciplinary team kind of mindset, which is a hard thing. It's an easy thing to say, yes, let's do it. A hard thing to really put into practice. So I think a lot of challenges on that adoption, a lot of challenges on kind of the scaling side. I only took a first stab at it, but I know there are many unanswered questions still.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, and I think you're right. Lean has got a very long way to go. I think it's got a very long way to run. There are companies that have adopted it extremely effectively, and we can learn a lot from them. But it's by far a universally adopted and understood concept, and a lot of these concepts are overlapping in a way.
Right.
Lean is a brand that encompasses a lot of things that other people are doing in other ways anyway. So no, it's a fascinating time. Okay, well look, I really appreciate you dropping by to say hi and answer questions. Been some really good ones today. One thing I think we spoke about, but I just realized I don't think we had covered it off, was we talked about the possibility of you doing a workshop on the Wednesday afternoon.
Yes, and I said I was due kind of checking on my schedule and getting back to you. Unfortunately, that is still a bit up in the air, so I am going to circle back on that, and we'll get back to this.
I just thought that as we've got some people that are interested in what you were saying, I suddenly realised that. I mean, my bad entirely for not following it up before. But if you can do it, that would be absolutely fantastic. Okay, well, thank you very much indeed to everybody for taking part, for some great questions. Do go and find Ash's book. We put a link up before, and there'll be a link on the Google Hangout site as well. Look forward to seeing you in Boston in September. And thank you very much for taking part.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mark.
That's all for today. Thanks so much, guys. Take care. Bye.